Welcome to another episode of Let's Go There, the podcast by the New Testament Church of God Women's Discipleship Ministries. Our podcast features a range of individuals providing spiritual insight, empowering advice, and biblical principles for everyday challenges. You were made to live the free life in Christ. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, this is Delroy again on session 2 of Loss, Grief and Bereavement. And before I get into session 2, I'd just like to recap. I looked at the first session, the impact of loss, grief and bereavement, the emotional tsunami that happens to us and how it disrupts so much things in our lives. Also, I spoke about the theories, Elizabeth Rubin-Kahn and her 5 stages. I spoke about the dual process, and I spoke about the tier. There's this kind of reconstruction that takes place when a person has had a major loss. And as I said before, quite often we focus on the death of a human being or the loss of a human being, but we discover that loss can be wide-ranging. Also, December 2021, many of us are facing another loss where we're now working from home and we're not too sure what's going to happen for Christmas. So that's another loss that some of us may be experiencing. So today I'm going to look at maybe 2 or 3 things, and I want to look at the first thing. We need to give ourselves the permission to feel. The 2 quotes I'd like to leave us at this point. I'm not a Freudian, but Sigmund Freud, he was a depth psychologist, and he said this: unexpressed emotions never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. And here's another saying: unexpressed emotions tend to stay in the body like a small ticking time bomb. They are illnesses in incubation. We know our emotions have a wild effect on us. And some of us as believers may think, well, what's the need of all this emotion stuff? Well, let me be very clear. If you want to know the importance of emotions, read Psalms. The psalmist talks about the breadth and scope of emotions. And in fact, some of you may know that if people don't even subscribe to a faith, but they read the Bible, the most read part of the Bible is Psalms, because it talks about human experience, love, joy, happiness, betrayal, murder, anger. There's some psalms called imprecatory prayers, where the psalmist asks God to kill individuals because of the way they've treated him. And I bet 1 or 2 of us have had similar feelings. So if you think that emotions are not a part of what we should be talking about, you've not read the book of Psalms. Psalms deals with the rawness of emotion, and it's worth looking at. So Freud said, unexpressed emotions never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. What does he mean? This is the fact. We now know that emotions, especially unpleasant emotions, are always seeking healthy expression from our bodies. But what happens if we don't talk about our emotions and we bury them? What happens? These very powerful emotions find places in our bodies to lodge. They hide in joints, in muscles, in organs, in liver, in stomach, in our stomachs, causing a whole heap of problems. Unexpressed emotions can lead to type 1 diabetes, heart failure, brain hemorrhage, psoriasis, eczema, a whole range of difficulties. Recently I was, and this is all to do with emotions that are not expressed. They're wanting expression, we're not talking about them, so they are seeking ways to be expressed. And we lodge them in our bodies, we hide them in our bodies, and it causes major problems to us. So let me give you an example. I was doing some training with the NHS in Birmingham earlier on this year, and I met somebody years ago. They were called chiropodists, they're now called podiatrists. So I said to her, is it possible that unexpressed emotions can eventually find its way with bad feet? She said, yes. I said, how does it work? She said, unexpressed emotions, she said, wants healthy expression. But what happens, they find a lodging place in people's back or their spine. They then have problems with their hip. They then can't walk properly. And then they're still not talking about the problem. From the hip, it goes down the thigh to the knee, and over a period of time from the knee to the ankle and then to the feet. You would never ever think that unexpressed emotions would have that effect on us. So it's really important that this whole thing around unexpressed emotion is incredibly important and really important for our well-being. So we need to give ourselves the permission to feel. To feel is not unspiritual, is not unscriptural. It's interesting, just as an aside, there's a portion of Timothy where Paul writes to Timothy, and on 3 occasions he tells Timothy, remember to get this when you see me, to remember to get that when you see me. What we understand is that the great apostle Paul was feeling incredibly lonely, and he wanted Timothy to come, but he needed certain things that he was familiar with. So emotions are incredibly important to our well-being. What we know is this: if as a parent you teach your children how to express their emotions, quite often in Caribbean culture, we slam people down, we close them down. This is what we know. If you raise children in a healthy environment where they can talk about their emotions and they won't be ridiculed or condemned, what happens is, we know this now, they will form better relationships. They do better at school, college and university. They are better in their careers, better in finances, and they have really good relationships. So the thing about giving ourselves the permission to feel is absolutely important. The second thing is unsent letters. I remember sharing this with some pastors a few years ago, and my goodness me, they thought I was writing a letter to raise the dead. No, it wasn't that at all. Unsent letters, they use it in bereavement therapy, really important, is a way of externalizing difficult emotions. So you write about it. So things that maybe you couldn't say to the individual when they're alive, or you weren't there when they're passed, and you feel guilty and remorse and so forth. So unsent letters, as it implies, you write about what you're experiencing, but it can't be sent. So unsent letters are really powerful, very important. And I'll share with you from one of my counselling experiences. Many years ago, somebody was referred to me. This was in the NHS, referred for counselling. She didn't want to come, but she came. She sat down in the seat and eyeballed me and she said, Delroy, this ain't going to work, you know. So when you have somebody like that begin the session, you know that you're kind of in for a hard time. Anyway, we worked through the session and I just got this sense that this individual was angry. And I said to her, you're angry for some reason? She said, no. Anyway, it transpired that she was angry. And I said, what are you angry about? She said, I was with my husband for weeks. He was dying of cancer and I was with him, I nursed him, and I went to the toilet for 5 minutes. And when I went to the toilet, that's when he died. And she said, I was angry, I was devastated that he did that whilst I was away. So we worked through the session, and she said, I don't know what to do with this anger. So I said, have you thought about writing an unsent letter? And she said, well, what's that? So I explained it to her. And it took a few weeks to write the letter. And she wrote the letter in the end. And she said, Delroy, I wrote the letter. I was a bubbling mess. I cried my eyes through it. But you know what? She said, I feel so much better having written the letter. But I don't know what to do with it now. And this idea from nowhere just popped into my head. I said, you've got his ashes at home, haven't you? She said, yes. Have you thought about burning the letter and putting the ashes in the little case? She said, what a good idea. She went. I was going to see her 2 weeks later. She did that and she came back and she said to me, Delroy, guess what? I've written the letters, you know. I burnt it, put it in the little vaults with my husband's ashes. And guess what? I've met somebody. Now, I'm not saying that you write unset letters, you're going to meet people, but this whole thing of dealing with unexpressed emotion. Her husband had died 7 years previously, and she was really struggling. It was affecting her work and her relationships, but she was able to move past that by writing unsent letters. Incredibly powerful. Try it. It's really good. We're going to go now on to session number 3.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you found it inspiring and insightful. Stay tuned for our next episode. Subscribe and tell a friend. For more information about our ministry, please visit www.ntcg.org.uk/WDM. Thank you.